Hello and welcome to Weapons and Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. Just ahead on this week's episode, the China problem. Hear from a panel of experts on the challenges China poses to the U.S. military as it addresses strategic, technological, and operational issues, highlighting the implications for national security and defense policy. Plus, meet the Vigilant Halo from Blue Halo. We saw this beast in Tampa at SOF Week, and when it caught our eye again at Airspace Cyber, we were hooked. Find out why this command and control center could play a role in America's next military conflict. But first, some headlines you may have missed. The Pentagon says nearly 7,000 National Guard troops from 16 states are assisting in relief efforts in the disaster zone in the wake of Hurricane Helene. With Helene's death toll nearing 200, rescuers fanned out using helicopters to get past washed out bridges to reach isolated homes. The storm, which was one of the deadliest in U.S. history, knocked out power and cell service in some towns and cities, leaving many people frustrated, hot, and increasingly worried days into the ordeal.
As the DoD continues to aid response efforts, Secretary Austin and department leaders will continue to be engaged and stay in close contact with federal, state, and local officials to ensure resources are available and to maximize a coordinated response.
The storm unleashed the worst flooding in a century in North Carolina, nothing more than an estimated 2 feet of rain in some places. After North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper said active-duty U.S. military units may be needed to assist in the long-term recovery, the DoD said 1,000 soldiers from the 18th Airborne Corps would deploy to North Carolina to help local communities recover. President Joe Biden also gave the green light for more troops to be sent in if needed. Satellite images of the Wushang shipyard in China are said to show several floating cranes exactly where one of the country's most modern nuclear submarines should be located. This fell between May and June, a senior U.S. defense official told Reuters. A spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington said he could not provide any information. The Ministry of Defense in Taiwan said the island's intelligence services were aware of an alleged sunken Chinese nuclear submarine. Defense Minister Wellington Koo said authorities were kept informed, quote, through various intelligence and surveillance methods, but they did not elaborate. China has the largest navy in the world and is trying to produce a new generation of nuclear-armed submarines. It's the end of an era. The last operational McDonnell Douglas KC-10 extender left Travis Air Force Base on September 26th, marking the end of a 43-year run by the long-serving aerial refueler. For more than 4 decades, the KC-10 played a key role in the mobilization of U.S. military assets, taking part in operations like the 1986 bombing of Libya, also known as Operation El Dorado Canyon. KC-10s went wheels up during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, as well as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
It's about the people. It's about the community, the airmen who made the aircraft what it is. It's about the camaraderie, the stories you've all shared with each other, the long nights, the deployments. It's about that shared sense of purpose, of working on and operating an aircraft that wasn't just a machine, it was a lifeline, a workhorse. It's a symbol of American air power.
Even though the KC-10 is leaving, the mission is not going anywhere. Enter the KC-46 Pegasus. As of September, 88 of an anticipated 93 were already delivered to bases across the Air Force, including Travis. The United States and China, the ultimate It's Complicated Facebook relationship status. Our economies are intertwined and interdependent to an alarming degree. According to a report from the Government Accountability Office, nearly a third of foreign students and scholars in the U.S. are from China, with some of them involved in developing defense-related technologies. If you keep the view narrow enough, it might look like the two countries are allies, but widen that field of vision, and a much more complicated picture begins to emerge. If you want to know how the U.S. views the threat China poses to the U.S. and its interests, just invite Secretary of the Air Force, Mr. Frank Kendall, to be your keynote speaker.
I realized immediately that China was aggressively investing in the ability to defeat the American ability to protect power in the Western Pacific. I've been talking since 2010 about the threat that China poses in particular and what their military modernization means for our ability to project power.
China is not a future threat. China is a threat today.
With that in mind, it should be no surprise some of the most knowledgeable and informed minds on the China threat were asked by the Air Force Association to sit on a panel at Airspace Cyber 2024 titled The China Problem. While each brought their own thoughts to the table, there is no doubt a consensus about where the U.S. is and where it needs to be. According to Brendan Mulvaney, director of the China Aerospace Studies Institute at Air University, part of the challenge is understanding the opposition.
They're not approaching these things as the United States military would, and they are simply trying to keep us out long enough to accomplish whatever that is. And that means, hey, I don't care if I can't beat an F-35 if the F-35s never get there. So they have anti-air access, aerial denial is what we like to call it. The Chinese call it counter-intervention, pushing the Air Force, pushing the Navy, pushing our allies and partners out long enough. So that means longer-range air-to-air missiles, longer-range ballistic missiles that'll attack aircraft carriers or tankers, or all the things that we need to enable our better aircraft to get in. They just simply want to keep them out, and that's where they think they probably made the biggest strides over the last 15 years.
While many eyes are focused on Taiwan as a likely tipping point, Dr. Kevin Polpeter, Director of Research at the China Aerospace Studies Institute at Air University, says space is the domain that concerns him in trying to plot out what the Chinese might do. According to the Defense Intelligence Agency, China doubled its number of satellites in orbit between 2019 and 2021, from 250 to 499.
Because of China's active defense strategy, which is very offensive, even maybe advocates preemptive strikes, and then you couple that with how they see the importance of space, that China could strike us first in space, and that any sort of conflict between the U.S. and China would begin up in space.
Another concern, miscommunication. Wayne Ullman, the National Intelligence Officer for East Asia, cautions an inability to read each other's signals could be the thing that sparks a confrontation.
We're not good at reading their signals. They're not particularly good at reading our signals. So there's a lot of opportunities for sort of misunderstanding that can happen here. And so accidentally finding ourselves in a fight is probably the bigger thing than some sort of deliberate, we're going to institute a 6-month plan that gets us to combat.
Of course, for all that's new, there are tried and true methods China used against the U.S. and will continue to use against the U.S., namely cyber warfare. According to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, China, quote, remains the most active and persistent cyber threat to U.S. government, private sector, and critical infrastructure networks.
The way the Chinese think about warfare is that sort of information, your ability to manage that. That's sort of like the key thing. You've got to do it better than the adversary. You've got to defeat the adversary. So the two other pieces of that, one of them being electronic warfare, which is a passion of Mike and mine going way back. And then the other one, of course, is cyber. So invested very heavily in both of those domains, and they're going to present real challenges.
Then there are the more traditional means of war. According to Mulvaney, since taking his position in 2012, Xi Jinping increased the size of China's rocket force by 33%. By Mulvaney's count, China has lots of medium range, lots of intercontinental, and lots of short-range missiles across the board, intentionally intermingled, nuclear, non-nuclear.
You want to talk about pulling your hair out, thinking about deterrence. That's what should keep you up at night. What is he going to use that for? What is the response of the president when you see some missiles coming over? There's not many, and you know they may not be nuclear, but they might be. I don't want to be in that position.
One of the buzz terms you hear a lot at military conferences is command and control. The troops in the field, having a centralized piece of equipment that can perform a laundry list of the things they need done is crucial. Enter our weapon of the week, the Vigilant Halo. The first thing you notice, it passes the eye test. It looks cool. But beyond the brawn are some serious brains, ready for a host of serious jobs. Built by Blue Halo, Vigilant Halo offers a real-time command and control option for operators in the field. It's capable of delivering air traffic control, as well as beyond visual line-of-sight drone operations and counter-drone detection for military, federal, state, and local applications. Blue Halo's COO, Trick Ferguson, says it's a concentrated effort to put as much control as possible into the hands of those closest to the action.
Vigilant Halo is a vision of how do we create a common operating picture for our warfighters to be able to control airspace in unique ways. We have very, very sophisticated technology that allows that to come into kind of one interface.
But what if time, circumstance, and simple logistics make getting the vehicle where it needs to be impractical? Blue Halo's senior director, Stephen Lloyd, says they've got that covered.
You might not have room for equipment back in an airplane or a helicopter, but you can certainly get it out there in a Pelican case or a laptop. But this also gives us the capability to make everything that's out there a sensor. So you've got this is all scalable and can be networked together, and then talk to other domains that are already out there with a multitude of other sensors. Now you have that where the warfighter may have a laptop, or somebody may have a laptop and they see something, or their sensor does, and now everybody in that domain can see it.
With lessons learned every day in Ukraine, the ability to protect troops from drone attacks is a problem in need of multiple solutions. Ferguson says their product provides that.
We don't have the redundancy we need as a nation, either here or forward deployed, to be able to operate in clear airspace in really complex situations. With the evolving unmanned system threat of the world today, that capability is more important than ever. And we hope to be able to demonstrate that capability and make it available to more folks.
As each branch of the military continues to reorganize and restructure in the face of a growing threat from China, Lloyd says Vigilant Halo is built for deployments to austere and remote locations.
It's got to be very durable and reliable. It's got to work every time. You got to be able to pick it up and move it if the bad guys find out where you're at. You got to be able to go. So that's got incredible versatility.
For many people, their knowledge of how fighter pilots interact is based off what they know about Maverick, Iceman, and Rooster. But how do real fighter pilots talk to each other? We recently came across a conversation between an American F-35 pilot and a German Typhoon pilot. So we thought you might like to see and hear the real thing in this week's Comms Check.
First Lieutenant Alexander Grant, I go by Stitch, and I fly the Eurofighter Typhoon for the Mighty Richthofen wing in Germany.
Yeah, I am Captain Patrick Pierce. Call sign is Hobbit. I fly F-35s out of RAF Lakenheath. For this competition today, the way it was worked out is we were given a slip of paper. We had a location in which we're going to meet up at a certain altitude. We would not know who was fighting until we turned in and at the merge. So as our aircraft passed by each other, I'm like, oh boy. There's a Eurofighter, which is actually like pretty cool.
I've never seen an F-35 so close. When we train in Germany, I only fight other Eurofighters. You don't really understand what your advantage is. And today, the Eurofighter having a little bit more thrust than the F-35, for example, I can definitely understand what the advantage of my aircraft is. And we were ever facing each other. He would probably kill me beyond visual range even before I even knew he was there. So the stealth capability, I don't have that.
So what it looked like today was a lot of one of these maneuvers in which Stitch here was saddled up behind me. He was able to get a gun deployment.
You can actually see the gun rounds coming down when I deploy the gun and those not loaded.
You can just feel it in like the pit of your stomach. You're like, man, this guy just won the fight and it hasn't even ended yet for another minute or so. So the entire goal is, like, if you're defensive, is to survive and then create an offensive scenario as much as possible. The best way to do that is to put them out front, which now you're no longer defensive and you're the offender. That was cheesy.
He will probably be able to tell that I'm going in for guns by pointing my aircraft at him. And if I don't have my closure under control, I'm way too fast, he can basically just brake, and then I'm like, oh, and now I'm shooting behind his tail, and now I'm defensive.
You're underneath a lot of G's, if you will. You're going through some pretty extreme flight dynamics. If you're 200 pounds, that equals, 1,800 pounds of like what your body feels like at that time. You're looking behind, you're looking up, you're looking around, and you're underneath that kind of strain. It puts a pretty big physical strain on your body.
I would say I turn my head up to 7 Gs. After that, I don't do anymore, but that's not good for the neck, so.
We're rounding the final corner on this week's episode of Weapons and Warfare. As always, please like and subscribe to at least some of our social media feeds. We have several. You can also email us directly, weaponsandwarfare@san.com. So I don't know exactly when you're watching this episode, but we're publishing it just a few days after the world marks the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel. A year ago this week, a group of terrorists stormed into southern Israel, slaughtered more than 1,200 innocent people, and kidnapped another 250. Over the course of the last year, which included just one ceasefire, 117 hostages came home alive. 37 came home dead. That means there are around 100 hostages still in Gaza by Israel's tally. At least half of those people are believed to still be alive. But neither Hamas nor Israel seem willing to make a deal for their release. Hamas is holding the hostages to negotiate an end to the war and an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Israel says it won't stop fighting until Hamas is completely destroyed. Which means for more than a year, dozens of innocent Israelis and 7 Americans have been tortured, starved, kept from their families in underground tunnels, or in some cases, the homes of Hamas sympathizers and militants still living in Gaza. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't have access to the same intelligence Benjamin Netanyahu has. I don't know if putting pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon will actually help with the hostage situation in Gaza. But I do know tens of thousands of people are dead as a direct result of October 7th. A ground invasion was launched into Gaza to rout out Hamas and free the hostages. But as painful as it is for those families to accept, it would seem their loved ones are no closer to going home today than they were more than a year ago. And that is one of the greatest tragedies in all of this. There are such things as noble fights. But if the noble fighter loses sight of why they decided to fight in the first place, they're lost. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphics artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson with Straight Arrow News, signing off.